So let's get right into the next session. It promises to be insightful and practical. It's focused on building healthier, more productive workplaces through effective assessment and restoration practices. And I've been through a few restoration practices, so I know that I'll be listening very closely. Our expert presenter is Stephanie Noël. She's principal consultant at Noël Company and brings extensive experience working with organizations of all sizes to address workplace dynamics, transform conflict, and advance a positive culture. She has a background in psychosocial health, conflict resolution, and organizational development. She supports leaders and teams as they navigate complex workplace challenges to create the best possible environments where people can work and thrive. So something us all as municipalities will be needing more than ever today. So welcome, Stephanie.
I know you couldn't see me. Well, good morning, everyone. Oh, I'm going to try that again. Good morning, everyone. Oh, that's better. That's better. Is it all because of the Jays? Maybe because of the Jays, but that's okay. So I want to make sure that I'm here today to talk about something that we all love. What is that? Conflict. Say it isn't so, but yes, it is conflict. So I want to make sure that I say, thank you to be here. I like to do my acknowledgement. My acknowledgement to where we work and live, and this recognition really makes us understand. It shows us respect. And respect is really at the heart of what I deal with every day when I'm working with organizations across the province. And I work with quite a few municipalities along the way. Roads crews, fire departments, waterworks, you name it, I've kind of been there. I also do a lot in healthcare. So I know time is of the essence, so I like to get it going pretty quickly. A quick background for myself. Earned an MBA many years ago. My undergrad's actually from Laurentian. I had a Laurentian alumni yesterday, so that was wonderful. Then I did my MBA through RMC and at the Royal Military College in Queens. And then from there, I did a Master's of Law in Conflict Resolution from Osgoode Hall Law School. And so it really was this merge of my academic training along with conflict resolution that's brought me to this spot that I am here today. So because I love conflict so much, tell me, I'd like to see a show of hands. When you think of the natural spot when you're in conflict, where do you go? So the first one is kind of avoid it. Who likes to avoid it? Oh, yeah. Exactly. Who likes to embrace it? A really good policy discussion. Who likes to embrace conflict? Oh, yeah, a little bit more embracing it. That's good. And how many of it is, it depends? Okay, it depends. Very good, very good. For myself, as a qualified mediator, when I'm in my business environment, I'm very collaborative and engaging and listening. When I'm at home, I'm a totalitarian dictator. Okay, I have the cash and the keys to the cars, so what I say goes. So the great answer to this is that it really does depend. And we all cycle through those preferences. And so this is called the TKI, or Thomas Kilmann Index. It's something that really leads us in the field of conflict. And what it is on the x-axis is how we deal with conflict, how we want to approach conflict, be it low or high. And on the y-axis is how we want to engage others with conflict. And we go through all of these cycles. I want you to know it doesn't matter. It does matter. They are all good ways to deal with conflict. It's about knowing what your environment in, what you're negotiating, and what you're dealing with. So, does this look familiar to anyone? Yeah. Do we know which municipality it belongs to? No. Okay. So we're dealing with potholes. And we think about conflict, we think about some of these little potholes that happen, and they happen within our culture. And so they start off really small, don't they? And these potholes, as we drop in them a little bit, maybe we swerve around them a little bit, but then they grow and they become those big sinkholes. And in organizations, conflict does the same thing. So when we ignore it, we try to swerve around it, we avoid it. When we do all of that, we're actually not repairing these sinkholes. So for everyone here, we know that you are this nexus between the people, the policy, and politics. And so what you do really affects three important fronts. That's the operational effectiveness that you're working towards, the reputation that you have. And we know council is there looking and the community's watching all the time, and the costs. The costs, we want to mitigate those costs when at all possible. So here, we know our common iceberg scenario. On the top is where we see the complaints, the grievances, the absences. And so those are easier to see because they're now bubbled up to the surface. However, there's so many hidden costs below this in lost trust, burnout, slow execution of decisions, decision fatigue. This is what gets us in our organizations. And one of the things that also sets in that's really costly to all of us, silence. Sometimes when our teams, managers, employees, we get silence, that is also can be very troubling. So when I work with organizations, a lot of them call me, and it seems to be consistently, I hear the words, I need an investigation. I need an investigation. And I really wonder about this because I feel that when I start investigations, these things have been brewing for an awfully long time. And there's been an awfully lot of signs and red flags along the way. And I just feel that sometimes people don't know all the options and the tools that we have when we get conflict in our organizations and they're starting to brew. So this slide really sums up three kind of ways that I'm going to go through today. Mostly assessments, restorations, workplace restorations, and we have investigations. And so if we can at all, we like to do assessments. They cost less, they have less risk, and they're engaging. And how many of you deal with unions? They don't mind assessments. They're often, all of my assessments, I include unions. I include union leaders. This is a very inclusive process, okay? And so the restorations, you can see how restorations, they do take a little bit more time, but it's the investigations that are long, they're onerous, and they get to the bottom of a compliance and are very rule-based, but they don't fix things, okay? So when conflict arises, what are we going to do? Ignore it? Investigate? Or are we going to assess? I want to make sure today that you leave understanding that assessing is such a powerful tool, and you have the ability to implement it a lot quicker than you think. And good assessment really de-escalates conflict. It's about having that conversation. So another thing that I see after investigations, this is kind of what happens sometimes, that red box, nothing. How many of you had a very serious investigation and what happens afterwards? Nothing. And this is from a psychosocial place, very difficult for the employees, difficult for witnesses, difficult for everyone around. People most of the time have the vibe. They can feel it. They feel that energy. And so this is very difficult when it's do nothing, because what happens is the group tends to keep circling that negativity. It's very hard to take it away. So the second part is sometimes we just we'll sign up some training. I didn't tell you, but I was a director at a center of training at Queen's for almost 20 years. I love training, but you can't PowerPoint away mistrust. You need to engage in training. You need to engage in the conversations. You need to engage sometimes in coaching, and you need to do a lot of other things to get those conversations going. And training absolutely helps, but it doesn't fix it all. And so that which leads to the restoration process. And that is a wholesome process that we use when we're in those situations where we're coming out of very difficult, challenging times with teams and groups. So we need to understand, how are we going to evaluate some of these? Well, assessments very much give us a lot of clarity. Restorations are focused on repairing, and investigations are more related to accountability. And so when we respond, we really want to respond with that proportionality to the risk. And I know this is a group that really understands that, which is we need to respond in a way that makes sense for the size of the conflict and the type of the conflict that we're dealing with. So when we look at which tool works best, assessments really work when you get, when you walk in or a group or a team leader says, there's a vibe going on. There's this undertone. Often I hear words like, we're kind of walking on eggshells here. People don't know, when the next thing will drop. That is a prime time to get an assessment going. The other one is the restoration, is often after sometimes critical events. It could be harsh disagreements. It could be leaders leaving, investigations, stuff like that. Then we need to restore the workplace. Now, restore doesn't mean turn it back to what it was, because we obviously got there and it was broken. So it's about repairing and renewing to move forward. So this is a lovely tool that I use, and I use this tool in pretty near all of my restorations and assessments, because it really helps people understand how conflict escalates in a workplace. And so the first part of this, the blue line over there, the solid blue, respect. That's our high watermark. That's us as CAOs. We want our workplaces to be in that respectful line all the time. That's our high watermark. Then we move into civility. For workplaces, that's the minimum requirement, that civility in the workplace. Those are things like saying, good morning, how are you today? That's answering emails in a reasonable time frame, having good conversations, listening to all different people in meetings and taking consideration for each other. That's what civility sounds like. That's what it looks like. And then we have what we call incivility. How many of you have heard about incivility? Yes. Another common word for that, microaggressions. So incivility, those are those little things that are a little bit annoying, or people stop saying hello. So if I use an example, let's talk about Joe and Frank, and I apologize if there's a Joe and a Frank in the room. But, Joe and Frank, they come together, they're working together in a team, they get along. How are you? Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Frank. Everything seems pretty good. They don't have kids on hockey teams together, and they don't watch the Jays together, but they get the work done. That's what civility is about. But then Joe and Frank, they start to, have differences. So all of a sudden, Joe doesn't say hi to Frank anymore in the morning. He just kind of walks by. Frank doesn't make eye contact with Joe anymore. But then what happens is Joe starts to say to his colleague, oh, that Frank, he's such a windbag. He just. And then Frank starts to say, that Joe, he's ignoring my emails. He used to reply to my emails and now he doesn't. Okay. Now, what happens? A couple days later goes by, a couple weeks, a couple months. Joe comes flying into the office and says, Frank, you're a bleepity bleep, blah, blah, blah. Maybe a little racial slur flies out, right? Frank comes right back at him. You're this and you're that. You've been blocking me. Well, now we've absolutely crossed that line. And this is what we call the gray area. It's very fuzzy. And before you know it, you're in it. And this is how important this is, because although I'm presenting this in a straight line, it absolutely takes a curve right up and it goes quite quickly. And I think what's really interesting is this next slide. And you guys will receive these slides. I have some paper handouts for you also. But these are the kind of behaviors that I see, and I'm sorry to say it, at the investigation level. This is when it's really serious. So when you get things that sounded just like leaving new staff unsupported, that turns into signals exclusion. Communication, not responding to communication or having tough conversations, normalizes avoidance. This is the slippery slope, the death by 1,000 paper cuts that ends up in a conflicted space and serious. And so I'm really trying to impress on you that difference. So when we talk about assessments, there's 3 kinds of lenses generally. How many of you have heard about assessments? And they're called all kinds of names. And in fact, we name them sometimes so that it relates to the organization. So they can be called workplace reviews, cultural assessments, cultural reviews, all kinds of names. And so, but there's 3 key themes that comes out that we work with when we're working through assessments. So the first one is the psychosocial risk that we have. And it's even mandated by the government. I've got a slide coming up. But this is the kind of systems that it sounds like, do you feel supported in your role? Are you heard? How clear are the expectations from your supervisor? This is a very individual type of assessment for your employees. The second one is relationship-based, and it's more of a conflict assessment. It's much more open in the way that we approach the comments. They're comments like, how are issues handled when they arise here? How do you describe the communication within your team? This is the type of work that we do in the conflict space, and I tend to say that this is the one I focus on quite a bit. The third one is the cultural space, where you're testing a little bit more around values and norms. So it has questions like, what behaviors are rewarded here? How do decisions get made officially and unofficially, right? You can hear how the tone of those questions, the orientation of those questions are a little different in the kind of information or data that we would be receiving. So, yes, so let's dive now into what a workplace assessment actually looks like, the actual do part of it. So a workplace assessment is very much a neutral. I come in often, or other consultants come in. We come in as a very neutral person, and we have one-on-one conversations with people on the team that are confidential and anonymous. Okay? And we're collecting that information. Now, depending on what the issues have been, with the team. Some of those questions might come from a psychosocial risk area, a conflict area, or cultural area. And that's the kind of work I do with the leadership team to find out what's going on. Sometimes I play in all of those areas because we really need to figure out what's going on. That's the assessment place. Have you ever tried to fix a car and never looked under a hood? You know, you can't fix what you don't know. So this is our place that we're doing that. Then after we do that, I collect a lot of the data and I roll it up into key themes. So it's not about a person one-on-one, it's about the key themes that are coming out. That's what helps us. That's what helps us understand what are the hot points. I had a lovely boss and he used to say to me, how do you know how many alligators are in a swamp, Stephanie? I'd say, they pop up and down, the eyes come up, they go up and down, they're all over. And the only way you're going to know is if you drain that swamp. And I very much believe that this process does that. It allows us as leaders to understand we've got 4 big alligators, 3 small ones, and this is what the hottest spots are. Now, do leaders have a sense most of the time when I go in on what the hot spots are? Absolutely. But we've all heard, you know, how the loudest person in the group seems to be heard the most. And this process allows everyone to be heard equally. And that's really important. So once we do that, we collect those key themes and I like to come back and present them to the leadership group, and I also present them to everybody that participated. And the reason that I do that is I also ask them for their recommendations on what they think should happen to improve the workplace. And I'll have to tell you, they come up with some of the greatest ideas. And you know that from your people. They have the ideas. I also love the field of change management. And one of the first founding parts of that is engagement. And when you're walking through assessments like this is exactly what you're doing, is engaging them. So this assessment is about them, but it's also about them moving to the next spot. And that's the data that we collect. And it's where they start to see themselves in the repair. Okay, so the frameworks that I use are very much anchored in legal acts. I wanted to put that in there just so that everyone knows that they're there. This is the 13 workplace factors. These psychosocial factors are what measures the healthiness of a workplace and an organization. This has been adopted at the federal level, and the word on the ground is that it will soon become something that we'll all have to reinforce, and we'll be measuring our workplaces up against these 13 psychosocial factors. So you'll probably hear more about that in the future. So let's look inside a restoration. So a restoration is very much that healing spot, and it's where restorations turn assessments, insights into sustainable change. And so it's about a structured repair that we're working on. And so in practice, although I have this in a straight line, these are actually what I almost would call cards that we have in our deck that we can use. And we use things like leadership coaching, facilitated conversations, team norms, charters, team charters, things of that nature that we bring in. But what it is about is understanding the readiness of the team. The readiness of the team for which one of these tools that we will use to help to restore it. And let's be clear, there's no kumbaya circles, okay? In case anyone thinks there is not. There will not be. Maybe with somebody else, not with me. So we've now went through the workplace continuum, a couple of case studies. One of them, it was very much an us versus them, 2 departments not getting along together. They were sharing some of the resources, but with the tone, they could feel the vibe. This is one of those ones where they could feel the vibe. And we had two teams not gelling well. Sometimes we get this in sales and marketing or, different types of groups. But what we did there was we worked on an assessment and really got them to understand and have conversations about what they needed from each other. And opening up that conversation in that very non-accusatory way helped them come together and go, oh, well, this is how we can share this. This is how we can communicate. And they started to have cross-functional meetings and teams. Okay. The second case that I like to talk about was the leadership reset. And last night when I was having dinner, I definitely heard that, which is we have baby boomers retiring. And they've been leaders that have been leading that team for many years. And they get really good at that. They know what they're doing. They've been there for so long, and there's a system. It just works. And then we bring in a new leader. Well, with every new leader, we have sometimes different approaches, different styles. So this leader was a bit more rules focused, output dominant. And so when this happened, it started to almost get to the spot where it was going to be an investigation on misconduct. And I said, whoa, let's take a breather here. And when we did some of the assessment, it really was a misalignment of expectations. And obviously we did a bit of the leadership coaching to help the leader transition. But the team needed to transition too, right? That they were resizing their relationship. So the third one is a culture at the crossroads. And this was an organization, it was actually in a medical environment, and they felt that the team was underperforming. And so we did a bit of a restoration assessment there and found out that they were literally exhausted. They had 32 changes on the go at the same time. No one ever noticed. They just kept piling the changes on, piling it on, and everyone was shutting down. And so we had some conversations in order to kickstart a renewal, in order to get some control over all the demands that were happening with this group. So we know that silence is risk. So if we're avoiding it, chances are it's going to be costly. If you're handling it, jumping into investigations can be very costly and not repair very well. But if you're assessing it, you're getting a head start. So for you guys, what is we want you to do? We want you to ask early. Don't wait till you have a complaint. If you feel the vibe, start asking about it, start addressing it. Model transparency, share what you know and what you're doing. Normalize check-ins, make it safe for people to surface these issues before they explode. This is so important. Give them that space to vent, to come to you, to share that with yourself, your manager, your HR leaders, someplace safe that they can come to. Because when I'm dealing with things, often people have been festering, no kidding, months and sometimes years. I had an accountant in an organization, and it was a municipality. When I was starting to interview her for the assessment, she came in with a banker's box. A banker's box. She plopped it on the desk and said, I've been waiting 18 years for you to come. Yeah, that was a little long. 18 years, and she had all the paperwork. So, of course, we want to go from a compliance spot to a culture spot. And that's where you guys really have the role to be able to do that in your organizations. So here's a short little list of what healthy organizations are. And I'll say it right now, they're not perfect. They're not perfect. But you know what they are? They're adaptive. They are places where people trust each other enough to have hard conversations and that they'll still be able to communicate effectively the next day. You'll still have conflict, but it's productive conflict, not poisonous. That's what healthy organizations look and sound like. So I asked you in the beginning, how will you invest in your workplace? Are you going to be see those the early cracks, respond with an assessment, not assumptions? Can't fix what we don't know. Invest in restoration before the repair costs are multiplied, and model transparency for everyone moving forward. So I'll pretty well close with my potholes. If you keep driving around them, you don't deal with them, they will turn into sinkholes. But you need to understand that you can't fix what you don't understand, and you can't fix what you haven't diagnosed. So you want to protect the assets, and those employees are your best assets. So turn some of that tension into creativity, into engagement, into innovation, and creating healthy workplaces to do that so that they can have the conversations is the way we like to go. In closing, assess before you act, restore before you lose trust, and lead before you're asked to. And if any of this has resonated with you, if any of you are struggling with a team or a group, and you're just having a hard time getting them back on board, reach out. I'd be happy to help you along the way in whatever way I can. I've worked with a few of you in the room, and I want to thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for allowing me to be here and talk with all of you today. Not too sure on the time. If we do have time for questions, 5 minutes. Okay. I'd love some questions. I'll answer them the best that I can. Oh, sure. Okay. Oh. Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah.
And the little something I was saying, I also, then I called him, how I'm supporting you, what do you need from me? And I'm a bit of a facer, so I always feel like what I took it going on, which is not my role. But I do feel that under that action right now. So, we want to see the leadership team to try to raise that on track.
Yeah.
But you're going to get a call from me.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. 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 Thank you. Dear Lori brought me here. Yeah. Yeah. It is. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think one of the things that's really interesting is I mentioned that I was a leader for many years. I led a training center at Queen's University, so I've been on that management side for many, many years. And when I became a neutral about 5 or so years ago, and I started doing these interviews, I was so stunned at some of the comments that I heard. I was so surprised because some of these comments were really foundational. They were just, and they had lovely bosses. And I would say you can see your leadership there. They care about you. Can you not speak to them about this? Because not only am I interviewing them, at times I will try to coach people along. And for some organizations, when they were smaller, like when you're in the smaller municipalities and townships, they're like, oh, well, you know, the HR person is the cousin of the blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I'm not going to go talk to her about that. Like, I don't want her to look at me at the next event and think about how upset I am about this. So it really honed in on me the importance of the third party neutral for people to come, have that coffee moment, you know, just tell me, lay it out, and then they can leave. And then I can take what I've learned and roll those up in themes. I said earlier in the presentation, they were excited when I know I have the team, when I'm doing the presentation and regurgitating back their key themes, because now they're looking at each other and going, I'm not the only one who feels this way. I'm not the only one that feels this way. And they absolutely engage in it. They see themselves in it, and they see themselves in the repair to move forward. And sometimes that's resetting the lines on how we're going to participate in the office, which means things like, and I have to say it, stop gossiping, right? It's hurting everyone. And even though somebody's not brave enough at this point to really stand up and put their foot down, I'm now legally putting the foot down for everyone, so nobody else does. I do it. I wear it. And say, we're not doing this. And everyone exhales. That's what it feels like. Mm-hmm. Well, there was another question. Do I have time? Sure. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, what I would say to that is it's very interesting because you're part of the senior leadership team, obviously. And if you want the employees to speak, I don't know what kind of culture you have going on. And in order to get to that next spot, you need people speaking openly and feeling safe to speak openly. And I've went into organizations where nobody would ever dare to speak to somebody in senior leadership. That's how unfortunately toxic that the environment can be. So, and when you interview them, they have reasons why. And leadership's not naive, and they know. You know, we had a previous mayor that behaved this way. We had, you know, counselors that, you know, went over the line at times. You know, so the employees become very removed. So if you have an environment where employees are being forthcoming, then you certainly do. These could be, remember how one of the points on there was, you know, your check-ins? Make those check-ins regularly. They are so important. When I do management coaching, I make sure that they know how important their communication amongst their team is. It's absolutely fundamental. I don't want to hear about the report over here. Your team is saying they don't see you and they don't hear you. If you have a manager that's locking themselves in their office, get on it. You can't imagine how fast it starts to just go down. Because what do we do when we don't have complete information? What's the first thing we do? Oh, we fill it in, don't we? And given our attributions, what do we fill it in with? Negative, terrible things. They're doing that to us. Why are they doing that to us? And that's what they fill in the lack of information. So if you've got great communication going on and you feel that people are being transparent and they're open in what they're doing, I would dive into some of the psychosocial, the 13 factors of psychosocial work and go, gee, how are we ranking with this, right? And then start to measure it. You know, my MBA background tells me, let's measure, right? I put it in as many things as I can, because I also want to feel the bar moving forward. So I would that's where I would spend my time. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Good. I'll be here for a few more minutes if anybody wants to talk on break. By all means, I have a paper handout with the key slides. And I enjoyed myself. So thank you so much for inviting me.